So it is Eating Disorder Awareness Week this week. So we've decided that we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about a few topics around the topic around eating disorders. I'm sure things like that will go wrong several times throughout it. So I've got two people with me here. We've all got experience of eating disorders. So would you like to both do a little bit of an introduction of yourselves?
Go on, Adam.
All right, I'll go first then. Yeah, hi, I'm Adam Fair. I'm 25. I'm from the northwest of England, from Cumbria, and I've had an eating disorder since I was 11. And it's a pleasure to sort of be here today with Hazel and Christina, just talking about eating disorders, stigma, and how we can hopefully raise more awareness.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm not going to say how old I am, but I hope I look younger than I am. I'm based in Norwich. I've had an eating disorder for the last 24 years, although I'm recovered now, and I'm an ambassador for Beat, and I talk about recovery and loads of positive things about how you can live your life free of having an eating disorder, but also just to raise awareness of the kind of problems that people face. Yeah, that's me and my cat who's joined me today.
I suppose I should probably add that I'm Hazel and I'm 34 and I've had an eating disorder since, I'm not sure to be honest, sometime in my teenage years I became disordered and it just got worse. So our first topic is stereotypes, and I suppose we should start with the elephant in the room of none of us are teenage girls.
Wow.
Since that seems to be what everyone seems to think someone with an eating disorder is.
I always start my sessions with saying it's not just teenage girls. I mean, I was a teenage girl when I was diagnosed, but I've been turned away from services because I was a pregnant woman in my 20s. You know, I went to see my doctor and he said, oh, you'll be all right. If you were able to get pregnant, then you should be fine, and didn't give me any help. And, I think there's a fundamental problem with GPs if you aren't a white teenage girl as well. It's always that stereotypical middle class white teenage girl, high performing, private school, that sort of thing, which I fit horribly into when I was a teenager. They just don't know what to do with you when you don't fit in that perfect box of eating disorder diagnosis, do they? Yeah, that's what they learn. That look out for teenage girls, right?
Yeah, I can vouch for that. I wasn't a teenage girl when I was diagnosed either. And I was told by the GP initially when, literally weeks after I started struggling, you've got an eating disorder, go home and eat more. And that was it. And when I was 18, actually, after I was just discharged from hospital under the crisis team, finally, I'm going to get some help. Oh, we can't fit you into a category, so we can't get any funding for you. And that was as far as it went. And this was just after I'd been discharged from hospital. So even when you're critically unwell, there's still stigma which stops people from getting treatment. And it's not just GPs, it's within eating disorder services as well, which I find really, really disturbing, actually. I know it's not the same everywhere, but it is a massive postcode lottery, but that shouldn't happen, surely.
Definitely shouldn't. I mean, I was 20, I think, when I was diagnosed. So a little bit older than they expected. And even then, I'd been trying to get help for about 2-3 years at that point. So yeah, I think they've got little boxes. And if you don't fit in that little box, it's just, as you said, they just don't know what to do with you, which is terrible, really.
What do you think was the thing that was stopping them from getting you the diagnosis, Hazel, that you sort of needed or could have got earlier on?
Well, if I'm honest, this is going to be on one of our future topics, but BMI, because I was bulimic, not anorexic, so I never got a really low BMI, and they were just like, oh, your BMI is fine, so there's obviously nothing wrong with you, which, yeah, isn't great.
Good old DSM-4.
Yeah.
And they changed that now, but BMI in that respect, they looked at me, and the doctor that was assessing me, he said, and this was before they changed to the DSM-5, he said, well, you're having periods, so how can you don't fit the criteria for anorexia, so they won't see you. And when I that doctor was a bad doctor. He's retired now, thank God. But when I did get seen by eating disorder services, because I needed to be seen by eating disorder services, they sat me down and they said, you're 34 weeks pregnant, you've been ill for all this time, why haven't you got any help? And I was screaming for help, and they told me I was I didn't fit the box, so they didn't refer me. And they were saying, but you're so high risk, it's so dangerous. And I was going, well, yes, I know. Not a surprise to me that I'm here, but apparently to you. Yeah, and I've spoken to other women who've had eating disorders while they're pregnant, and they've said they didn't know what to do with me. And I know Adam's had that experience as well, that they literally said to you, I don't know what to do with you. And you think, well, you probably should. What do you think I know?
Yeah, no, I definitely had that as well. You know, the first appointment was you're a man, so we don't really know what to do with you because we've never had a man in our service before. And it's interesting you say about periods, because it's such a stigmatizing, it's just such a high level stigma about women, about periods. But the other side of things as well, being a male, is that my testosterone went completely, had no testosterone all the way through my teenage years, but no one picked it up. So I didn't grow, I didn't develop, I've never developed as a man. I talk about this quite a lot, but I feel it's so important because there's a huge gap being missed there, where you have a lot of potentially teenage boys who are struggling with their eating, who don't have the hormones they need to develop, yet it's not being picked up because the questionnaires are all about periods. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be about periods, but I'm saying you should have something for men as well, because it doesn't just exist in a vacuum.
Never occurred to me, the testosterone thing, if I'm honest, which is terrible to admit, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense now you've said this.
Yeah, and
it'd be great to see on TV, wouldn't it? It'd be great to see, you know, a man with an eating disorder, an older person with an eating disorder, because you know, you it's always on soaps, but you always see, and you know that they're going to be in a school uniform. Someone's going to say you look a bit fat, and then that's how it's going to go. And people, when they come forward, they don't see people who look like them, so they think must all be in their head. You know, they think, oh, I'm not a teenage girl, I don't fit. So people are going to laugh at me if I say I've got an eating disorder. And when Tess Holiday came out and said that she had an eating disorder, you know, the amount of vitriol that was leveled at her for saying that she was suffering, people are afraid of that, so they don't seek help because they're afraid people are going to laugh at them.
Yeah, just because of the body size as well. I know we'll get onto BMI later on, but that's just, it's disgusting how people are treated in, like I said, it's not just a white teenage girl, it's a white underweight teenage girl as well. And that's your stereotype. And if it's not all of them, then it's almost like you don't exist. And it's also, you don't exist to a lot of the services and, you know, care as well. And there's so much that we just need to work on it. And especially with what you went through your pregnancy, Christina, as well, it must have, I honestly don't understand it, because that is such high risk, not just to you, but to baby as well.
Yeah, and I will just add, for anyone listening, she was born super duper healthy, 6 pounds 4 ounces. She was very healthy. She is a giant. She comes up to here on me, and she's perfect, and she has not had any developmental problems because of my eating disorder. And I just want to make everyone aware that she was fine. It was just me that looked awful after she was born.
That's good at least.
Really
yeah,
good,
I don't want anyone to think about. I mean, there is obviously the huge risk of people, and I wouldn't want anyone out there who is pregnant to discount the risk. But I just want to say my story. Both my children were born very healthy.
But also, I think it's really important that message gets across, that it can be a risk, but they might be all right. But also, it's not the parents, it's not the mother's fault. It wasn't your fault you were unwell. You know, no. even if God forbid something had happened, wouldn't have been your fault, because you were unwell and you needed support, and that's what should have been priority there.
Yeah, and I used to cry when I made myself sick, because I was thinking, why can't I love this baby enough? And I was just crying while I was doing it, but I could stop myself doing it. And I felt, you know, I feel like a strong empathy with people who have problems with addiction during pregnancy and they aren't able to stop, because it did feel like it was something that I was sort of compelled to do. And I felt so awful. And I thought, well, if someone finds out, they're going to take my baby away. They're going to think that I'm an unfit mother, because a good parent shouldn't do that to themselves. And it made me really worried about talking to anyone about it. But now I'm glad that I do, because the number of pregnant women who have approached me since I have and gone, thank God, I thought I was the only person who had this problem. And it's just nice to know that you can help someone. And I think that, you know, you guys do the same thing, in that when you see people who make you feel like you're not alone, it really helps in the way that you deal with your eating disorder.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I also think that's part of the issue as well, when you're saying about how you felt like you should be able to stop. That's what people think. People think you should be able to just stop, but you can't. It is an actual genuine illness, and it is a compulsion, and it's not as easy as people seem to think it is just to, eat normally.
You get that lovely, we've had quite a few, haven't we, Twitter interactions with some fun people who said, well, what about starving children in Africa? Why don't you think about that? And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, why don't they use that more in psychiatric institutions? It seems so foolproof, there's a reason that doesn't work. People who are starving themselves and purging it, it's an intense self-loathing while you're doing it. You don't want to be doing it. You're not doing it thinking it's great. You're sitting there thinking, I hate. And I've always, every time I've ever purged, I've just sat there and felt absolutely disgusting afterwards. And then I have to do it again to feel okay, and I've not done it for 10 years now, and I'm really pleased about that. But I will never forget those feelings of sitting on a cold bathroom floor and just feeling like, oh God, why am I doing this? I don't understand. I wish I could stop.
No one does it for fun.
No, it's that horrible thing, isn't it? That you know what you're doing to yourself and you know what's happening, but you feel so utterly powerless to prevent it, even though it's even though you're doing it not to yourself because it's different, but even though you're doing it, you feel so powerless. And I think that's a huge barrier to some people reaching out as well, the shame that they feel for acting that way and doing the behaviors that they maybe do.
Yeah, you fear people are going to judge you. They're going to look at you differently. They're going to see you as being weak or pathetic or vain even. I hate the vanity one because it was never anything about that. It's never about that at all for me. So,
not me.
Yeah, never. I did a carers workshop yesterday with Beat, and it was so sad because the parents said they felt so powerless and they knew that their children were purging or starving, and they said, well, what can we do to stop them? And I said, well, nothing really, because they aren't enjoying doing it either. But I hate how you must feel seeing that someone's doing that. But I always used to feel that if people knew that I made myself sick or that I took lots of laxatives, and it was really unpleasant, but I always used to think that if people knew that they would distance themselves from me, because who wants to be associated with someone who does that to themselves? It's such a sort of violent, unpleasant thing to have to be associated with, that I can tell people about my restriction because people seem quite accepting of that. But when I talk about making myself sick, people are like, why would you do that to yourself? That's horrible. It's a horrible thing for people to think about.
Quite interesting, actually. Me and Hazel was talking about that before. I know Hazel was just doing something about, eating disorders and about purging. And there was certain language about being sick that said, oh, don't use that. It's too much. And I was like, that's the whole problem. We're not talking about the sides of eating disorders, which obviously we shouldn't talk about specific things, numbers and specific ways of doing things. But if we avoid the whole conversation about the more, let's say, I don't like the word dirtier, but you know what I mean, side of it, then all we do is add the shame and the stigma to the people who are struggling, so they won't reach out because they think it's abnormal, when actually we need to provide the message that, no, it's not normal that you're doing it, but it's a reaction to something and you need help and you should reach out for that help still. And, that's how I see it. It's not, we shouldn't be avoiding the hard conversations just because people might find it a difficult conversation to have.
It's a bit like the whole thing where people think that if you mention suicide or if you mention self-harm, people are going to go try it. And it doesn't work like that. All you're doing is adding a taboo, which is just not helpful for anyone. But yeah, you don't say specifics, don't explain methods or anything like that. But surely we should be allowed to at least vaguely explain what happened.
Yeah, I think people kind of, when you talk about restriction, and I know that we've all had an experience of restriction and in some way or another, probably everyone, disappointingly, knows what it's like to feel hungry or to be on a diet. So they can kind of empathize with that idea of, they can't really, but in their head, they're like, oh, well, I've known how it feels to feel hungry and being really starving, or I've known how it feels to want to lose a bit of weight. But people just cannot get their heads around the idea of things that happen to do with digestive issues. they don't like talking about that, you know. Like if you phone in sick for work and you've got a stomach bug, you're really embarrassed about talking about that sort of thing. And Adam's so great at breaking down the stigma about talking about his stomach, you know, he's great. And so many people I've seen just say to you, it's amazing. I was the first time I felt able to talk about stuff like that because someone else is standing up and being brave. And I think with purging disorders, we do need more of that, because people are, I mean, they just can't get their heads around the idea of what would cause someone to do that to themselves, I think.
I suppose people associate it with like illness, like sickness bugs and viruses and stuff. So maybe they move away from it because they almost feel like, not that it's contagious or whatever, that's not the right word, but I don't know, I'm not describing this very well. I think they just sort of see it as disgusting.
Yeah, talking about bowel habits and things and sickness has always been a taboo, though, hasn't it? Even when you went right from being a young kid, we don't talk about that. You know, you close the door on the bathroom when you go in and you open it when you come out, and that's it. Don't talk about it, it's done. And it's such a massive problem. Like I said, that's why I talk about my stoma so openly, because you know what? We need to talk about it. It's important. Not only for eating disorders, but for lots of other things as well. There's so many illnesses which can be explained by your bowel habits and things that we should just talk about a bit more, because it's normal.
Worrying in a way, because it means people don't know when something's wrong. Because if you've never discussed it with anyone, I know we're getting slightly off topic here, but if your toilet habits aren't right and you can't feel that you can't discuss it with anyone, then it's going to get to a bad state before you get any sort of help, isn't it?
But that's the thing that happened because of my eating disorder, though. My bowel habits became awful because of my eating disorder. I've got a stoma, at least in part, because of my eating disorder. And we need to talk about that too, because there is, you know, eating disorders aren't just, like you said, they're not a vanity thing. They're not a diet gone wrong. They're serious illnesses which can have lifelong effects for people. And I think that's what people don't quite understand. It's not like you're choosing to do something. It's not like, oh, you can snap out whenever you want and you'll be fine again. Actually, these illnesses, if you want to put them in a totality, they're not just mental illnesses. They really, really harm people in a lot of ways. Yeah. And I think people don't understand the seriousness of them unless they've been through it or have a family member who's been through it.
Yes, I've got GORD, which is a reflux disorder, because essentially I've damaged the sphincter that closes your stomach, and I'm going to have that for life. I'm on medication for life now. People don't like it when I discuss it though, because they just think, oh, it's just heartburn, but it's not. It's so much more than just heartburn. But yeah, people get really funny with me if I ever discuss it, or they explain that I can't eat certain foods because of it. They just get really, I don't know, odd about it. It's very strange. I assume they do that well.
People don't understand that I can't be sick. Because I've damaged my gag reflex so much from being sick. I can't actually, if I had norovirus and I couldn't be sick. Wow. I've only had one in the last 10 years. I've only had one illness where I've actually just been really sick involuntarily. And normally I have horrendous nausea and I've got all the feelings that you have just before you're sick, but my body won't allow me to be sick because I've made myself sick so many times, and it's not something that people really know about, because it's hard to talk about, you know. And then if you've got, you know, I had to have, with both of my children, I didn't have morning sickness, but I had everything associated with morning sickness. I had the nausea and I couldn't stand because I felt so nauseous, and I would have given anything to be sick because it would have made it go away. But like, I went to see a midwife and she went, well, it's because of your atypical anorexia symptoms. She said you've damaged your gag reflex basically. And I was like, God, I didn't realize you could do that to yourself. And when you go to a doctor, they tell you all the things that you can do. And I think it's like if you're a smoker, you look at the packet, you see it can cause all these things, but you think, oh, it won't happen to me.
Yeah.
I heard about your eyes, about your teeth. My teeth crumbled when I was in my 20s, and I had to get veneers to replace them. And I just refused to ever believe that it was because of my purging symptoms. I just was like, well, it's just one of those things, isn't it? And you don't want to believe it will happen to you, but it does.
And I think as well it's because for years your body is very resilient and stuff doesn't happen to you for quite a long time at the start. So you're like, oh, it will happen to me. It hasn't happened yet. And then all of a sudden it does. But then even when it does, like you said, sometimes that's not enough that just something happening isn't like, oh, I'm going to change things now, because you can't just decide to recover.
Yeah.
You can decide to commit to recovery, but you can't decide to be better the next day. It's not like you wake up and go, oh, I'm going to be better today. is so much more complex than that, and not even having severe health issues can just make you recover, because that's not how illnesses work.
I remember an inpatient, they gave me, because I used to take huge numbers, and I won't give you how many numbers, but I used to take a lot of laxatives when I went into inpatient treatment, and they gave me an information sheet about laxatives, and they said, look, it's going to shut down your kidneys, it's going to shut down your colon, it's going to shut down all these things. And I just like, well, it won't, because I've been fine. And I could not believe that it would happen, because and it scared me. The idea of it happening really scared me, but it wouldn't go into my brain that was something that would happen to me. And I was in hospital, so I was medically managed off them, but I never accepted that would be a consequence of what I was doing to myself. I just refused to believe it.
You think, in a way, though, I found this sometimes in the past. I found it worse to be told what the risks are. Sometimes I'd rather someone just supported me through what I was going through, rather than said, if you don't change, this is going to happen to you. Because actually all that does is make me feel worse about what I'm doing.
Sometimes. So when they try to like scare you out of it. Yeah. You can't scare or shame someone out of an eating disorder. People try.
You know what you're doing to yourself, because at the time, if you're in denial, nothing's going to change your mind anyway, let's be honest. Sometimes I think I'd rather they spent the time actually trying to support me through to get to a better place, rather than tell me what's going to happen if I don't. I don't know. That's just my opinion, but
I think it's quite. There's a lot of. I'm going to go really off piece now. When they look at the treatment regimes for anorexia and bulimia, they do treat them quite differently. I think there is a lot more focus on informing bulimic patients about the physical symptoms of their condition, and the anorexic is a lot more about supporting. But I think on courses that I've attended, they have said you need to inform bulimic people, or people with bulimic symptoms, what the consequences of their behaviour are doing. But I don't know how effective that is. I'd like to think that it's effective, because I'm not a psychotherapist with years of experience in treating bulimia, but I find it interesting that those physical symptoms, because the physical symptoms of anorexia are dangerous as well. But I don't know. I think bulimic symptoms are often very much overlooked in how dangerous they actually are.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think wider societal awareness of the risks is definitely important, because people don't really understand that. And same with someone, just because they're not underweight, it doesn't mean that they're not at high physical risk of an eating disorder. And I think that's a really big one as well. Like, especially, and it's perpetuated a lot by the media, who do these stupid before and after photos, and look at how unwell I was. I don't care how unwell you are.
Next week, I know there's going to be at least one.
Yeah, I know. I'm just getting ready for I've got some comments drafted up already.
Right. We have been talking now for 21 minutes.
I think we should
wrap up this particular episode.